Welcome back. So excited to be with you today. I am recording this episode in the month of February. And we all know February is the month of love, right? Valentine's Day comes smack in the middle of the month. So this is a thing that I hear so much from my clients. I want to feel more love, connection, appreciation within my relationship. So we're only going to tackle one of those today, which is love. How do I feel more love in my relationship? So love is a feeling, right? This is a feeling that we have inside of our body. You might just pause here for a moment and just kind of think about something that you feel love around, something that's easy to love. Your sweet granny, your newborn baby. Maybe you feel you were able to generate feelings of love very easily for these things. And just notice it's something that it's an emotion that we have in our body. It will present in different ways, swelling of our heart. I love in my gut, right? It is a feeling. And feelings are generated, especially feelings of emotions, are generated by how we think about something. This is why we can feel very loving inside when we watch a movie, a romantic movie. If you let yourself go into the romantic movie and be a part of the romantic movie, if you're not caught up in cheesiness about it or something, you really let yourself fall into it, you can have this feeling of love because of the way that you're thinking about things. There's also, I like to think about love, that we have a couple categories of love, right? There's romantic love. There is love that is like kind of an appreciation love, a deep knowing love. And then the other one is unconditional love. They all kind of go together and weave in and out of each other, but sometimes it's nice to think of them in these three buckets. So let's start with unconditional love. What is unconditional love and why is it so important? So unconditional love, let's go back maybe to that tiny baby. That baby is born, and oftentimes, most of the times, not all of the times, but most of the times, there are people, parents, maybe grandparents, maybe aunts and uncles, maybe the nurse that is there helping with delivery or something like that. They see this new little human being who has done nothing. They're not all they're doing maybe is they're screaming. Maybe they're making this terrible noise, but they're just existing and we feel love for them. There's no condition. They do not have to meet a requirement for us to love them. Just the fact that they exist, that they are supposed to be here, they are in sharing space with us, we decide to love them unconditionally. They don't have to do anything to earn that love. And this is really important to understand this of unconditional love. Now, as a child grows, we do as parents in a parental role, we put conditions on their behavior and their environment, different things like this, because it is our job to be teaching them things and to help cultivate spaces for them to be able to learn how to manage the world and manage their bodies and manage their emotions and all these kinds of things. So we do put conditions, but we do not attach their success or failure of these conditions to being loved. They can mess it up completely and we will still love them. We can still love them, even if they're not meeting the conditions that have been set out before them in the day. This is oftentimes, I know as a parent, especially when my children were very small, that at the end of the day and they were asleep, I would go in and I would look at them to fill myself up with the unconditional love again when they were quiet and they weren't tearing things apart in the house or, screaming at each other or whatever, right? I was able to take a moment and to see them just as they are, as human, with all their flaws and all their goodness and all their not goodness, and just love them anyways. This is why, again, going back to the idea of scenes in movies, right? Or in books, lots of books will describe scenes of two people laying in bed together and listening to their breathing and how the breathing changes. And then they fall off, one person falls off into sleep and the other person then has this space to fill up with this unconditional love for the other person. It's a little bit easier when they're not doing things that we have a lot of judgment and criticism about, right? And expectations around, that we can have unconditional love. You can also go to a real extreme where we see people in our society who have done things that are way outside of our societal norms, right? That they have committed crimes, things that we have judged as crimes, things that we have judged as we don't want this as part of our society. And there are people who intentionally provide love for them. Sometimes it's even the victims' families, right? That they understand and they realize, I can love you, person who is way outside of the bounds of what we expect in society. I can love you as a human. I can also then, we've decided to set parameters around what you can do and how you can move through the world for perhaps that person's safety and for other people's safety. But I can still, even when you behave in a way that is so outside of the bounds of normal, I can love you unconditionally as well. That one can be a harder stretch because it touches into a vulnerable place. But we really can see there are people who do this, right? Who forgive. And the reason why is not even necessarily so much for the other person, but for ourselves. When we love unconditionally, right, it opens us. It feels good in the person who's doing the unconditional love. We're released from judgment and criticism and trying to make things right and fixing things and cultivating things in particular ways, and are just able to fill ourselves up with this feeling, this good feeling. Love feels good, right? It opens us, it fills us. I keep making gestures that you can't see on the podcast of my hands sort of expanding away from my heart, right? Feel like the heart swelling. When we stop and feel unconditional love, it expands us. This is why we want to have it. So what's the role of unconditional love in our relationships, in our primary partner relationships? It's hugely important because research shows, as I do research on couples that are successful, relationships that are long-term and that they feel satisfaction out of them, what they find is that 70%, what researchers find is 70% of our arguments are not solvable. We have these arguments and there really is no solution to them. And so this idea of unconditional love in the face of being with a human that 70% of our, let's call it negative time, arguments oftentimes we classify as negative, are not really solvable. This idea of unconditional love, that I can love you and love myself in the face of there is not going to be a resolution of this particular conversation. I can still completely love you and not agree with your point of view. I can still completely love myself and have a different point of view. These things can coexist together. That it isn't about having the other person act or think or show up in a particular way in order for me to feel love towards them. This helps me feel better. That they get to be the human they are, I get to be the human I am, and there is still a space for love. Because we're not very good at controlling ourselves most of the time. And we're really not any good at controlling other people. So if love is conditional upon what somebody does or says or how they show up, there's not going to be very much love there. So unconditional love. Now, you can still have your opinions about things. You can still make requests about things. You can still work through certain things. But touching back to this idea that I can still feel love for you, even though 70% of our arguments, we're not going to come together on it. It's going to be unsolvable. But how we show up to those kinds of conversations when we still are in the place, we touch back on the place of loving anyways. You're going to show up to those conversations in a whole different way, right? Less defensive, less needing to be right. We can both have different ways of doing it. This might not be solvable, and I'm going to love you anyways. I'm not going to necessarily like the way you do it, and I'm going to maybe do it differently, but I don't have to make you wrong. I don't have to cut you down for it. I don't have to put myself down for it or make myself wrong for it, for my position and opinion about this. There is enough love. Now, maybe you need to fill up with that unconditional love when they're asleep or when your partner's away at the station. Maybe they need to be that far away and you look at their picture or you hold their pillow when they're gone to use your brain to fill yourself back up with that unconditional love. That maybe some of these conversations you have are such hot topics right now, right? That you need that space to touch back in and fill up with that unconditional love. The more you do that, the more that spills over into the other areas and the other times in your relationship. This is a good segue to let you know, if you're listening to this when I release it in February, over on our social media pages, Instagram and Facebook under Relationships on Fire, Relationships with the S. There's a 28-day love challenge in there. So for 28 days, I'm giving you a small little tip, a small little activity, right? Big habits are built with tiny changes over time. So if you want more love and connection, more feeling of love, more understanding of love, go subscribe over there so you can have a little bit every single day to help you practice it. This changes the tide because the habit of our brain is we're in getting through the day-to-day of life, especially when you have busy, crazy schedules. You have other people that you're responsible for, parents or children or whoever you're responsible for in your job and in their job, right? We have so much going on. We really get caught up in the minutia of life. And we're also wired to look at negative things. So we miss filling up ourselves with the sensation of love, with the presence of this unconditional love, no matter what is happening. So go over and subscribe to those pages so you get those things. You can have them pinged up for you every single day. Small little activities, small little thoughts. Most of them are questions, things for you to ponder, things for you to write down a little for yourself. You don't have to share it. It'll be different when you do it for yourself. I do give you some opportunities to get started and share something in the comments because you do want to be in action, right? So there is an opportunity to be in action. But redirecting your brain on purpose to think about love, in this case, is going to increase your capacity for it and your capacity to give it and to be present to it. Because as we look at the general category of love, we had unconditional love, just kind of the general category of love. Because it's a feeling and it comes from our thoughts. It's directing our thoughts on purpose in the direction of love. And to have us notice and have more thoughts that generate the feeling of love about yourself, a feeling of love towards your partner, or any other direction that you would like to increase your sense of love. If you increase your capacity, your ability to feel love in any area, it's going to help in the areas that it's tougher. Some things are easier for you to generate the sensation of love for, right? And some things or sometimes it is harder. So let yourself start with the easy areas and notice how you generate a sensation of love because of how you're thinking about a particular situation or person, right? Or time in your life. Go back and see other times in your relationships where it was easy to generate this feeling of love. It's not because it doesn't exist today or it can't exist today. It just doesn't exist today because you're not having those kinds of thoughts. It isn't about the circumstance, because we can have tons of love and connection even when the circumstances of our lives has changed, right? Let's go back to that unconditional love, the extreme example of somebody who commits crimes, right? There can still be love for that person. And that is a very extreme example, right? We can choose to feel love in that place and with that person, right? For ourselves, even though their circumstance is something that we wouldn't choose, that we're going to put boundaries around, right? That we have decided as a society that it's not okay, right? We can make those decisions and we can still feel love. So within the context of your relationship, you have the opportunity, even though the circumstance isn't maybe that romantic wedding or your honeymoon or those early budding days, right? Where it was easy to generate the sensation of love during those times, perhaps. You can use that to generate that sensation in your body and to see what those thoughts are and bring that capacity into today, to right now. And so go over, like I said, into the feed, and I give you little things every day in there on our Facebook, Relationships on Fire, or the Instagram. And there's a little something for you every single day. Now let's talk just a little bit about the third category, which I said is romantic love. And romantic love, again, this is how you choose to think about your spouse, right? To think about that significant other. Romantic love, you can say, comes out of, if we're looking at our base primitive way of being, is maybe pushed forward by procreation, right? Just as being animal beings, that there's a certain amount that has to do with that. It has a certain amount to do with finding our people, our safety, right? Our tribe, right? We are group, humans are group seeking people, animals. We're not loners for the most part. There's always exceptions to every rule. But for the most part, we go like to a nature special, we're a species of animal that goes in groups and goes in packs and seeks out these family organizations for safety, right? So our romantic has some of those components to it. Some of those comes from some of those primal places. But it also, again, has to do with how you are choosing to think about your partner in this case, or thinking about another person, that of bringing in that sense of attractiveness to them. and which is where we have this sense of romantic love. If you're having a tough time feeling unconditional love or generalized love with your partner, romantic love may be exceptionally difficult, right? You may be very far away from that right now. Or maybe you do have that part, that energetic, physical connection. And that one is easier for you to generate, that the two of you, that is a way that you can come together. Either way, build up the one that is easy for you. Pay attention to the one that's easy for you to let yourself grow and expand in that space. And then you can start to bring it over into one of the areas of love that's a little bit tougher, right? That's a little bit harder for you right now for whatever reason. And it doesn't really matter the reason, right? We want to give ourselves a lot of space and generosity and curiosity to take the areas that it's easy and let it spill into the areas that are harder. This might be a good reason that you come over and get coaching if you're having some areas that it is difficult for it to go into, and we can go more into that. But for right now, it's really noticing that love comes from how we are thinking about ourselves, about our partners. If we are directing ourselves towards things that feel positive about them, that is generous, right? That's appreciative. These kinds of things generate a sensation of love. Judgments, criticisms, needing them to meet certain conditions, this pulls us away from feeling a sense of love. You get to choose which one that you want to have. You get to choose which one you want to grow day to day. It is not something that just kind of happens. It is something that we have to practice. Love is a practice, just like all kinds of things in our lives, right? That we can practice it enough that it becomes habitual, brushing our teeth, or we can get lost in the busyness of life and find that we haven't been practicing it. And then we say things like, I have fallen out of love. It's not that you have fallen out of love. It's just you missed practicing it. So join us over on the social pages. I'll give you some practice, just a little bit of practice every day of generating this sense of love unconditionally for your partner, for yourself, for your relationship. Find the areas that we can be kind and gentle with ourselves about the story we say of our relationships to increase your capacity to feel love, to be loved, and to give love. All right, my friends, be committed, be present, show up with curiosity and love. I say it every time, for yourself, right? This is important, for yourself and for your spouse. This is how we grow. All right, we'll see you next time. Thanks so much for listening. Make sure you subscribe on your favorite podcast app so you can get every episode. And when you are ready to be in action, come find us. Facebook, Instagram, or our website. It's all the same name, relationshipsonfire.com. We've got that S on there. There's lots of us having relationships. So relationships with an S on fire.com. Thanks so much. Saying goodbye, your fire and water gal, Cori Myka. See you next time.